Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to another episode of the Hot Mess Life Coach, the show for people trying to get it together while the world falls apart. I'm your host, Brian Hogan, both a hot mess and a life coach. Is that allowed? I think it's allowed because here I am showing up as a hot mess and a life coach. So we're just going to go with that. Like I said, this is the show for people trying to get it together while the world seems to fall apart. I like to just remind us that it seems to be falling apart, but actually there is a great transformation happening. We're living in a time that is unprecedented and exciting, and it is one of the best times to be alive because the growth curve, the learning curve for us as human beings in a time of great struggle is unprecedented in history, in my opinion. So here we go. Let's get on with it. Today, I want to talk to you guys about forgiveness. And how that does not mean forgetting, okay? We talked 3 weeks ago about authentic happiness, and I mentioned the reach method of forgiveness. I think that's episode 2, so if you want to go back and look at that, you can. But today I wanted to share a personal story about forgiveness, because the last thing I want is for people to get the idea that forgiveness is somehow approval or that it's somehow condoning the behavior of someone who wronged us. It's not. Forgiveness is a solo act, first and foremost. We do it for us. Forgiveness is an act of letting go. The sponsorship guide for 12-step programs like AA and NA and all that stuff, it has a quote that is often attributed to the Buddha, but I'm not sure the Buddha actually said this, with the internet nowadays, who can tell? But it goes like this. Resentment is when you take the poison and wait for the other person to die. So that quote is a way of indicating to us that our resentment, while we think it holds the other person accountable, it puts them on the hook, it holds them up to a standard. Actually, all it's doing is holding us in a place of anger, holding us in a place of a grudge, holding us back. So I wanted to share a story with you guys about my relationship to my father, who happens to be a totally professional deadbeat, who was never really there for us as kids growing up. And I want to share about that and the powerful ways that forgiveness actually gave me freedom, and it gave me my freedom back. But first, I want to talk about some newly emerging science and research on the topic of forgiveness. So what does the science say about forgiveness? Well, we can all sort of understand why forgiveness is important. Like, if we didn't forgive small slights throughout the day, we'd be angry at everyone we know all the time because we're all a hot mess and we all mess up, and we all mess up a lot. So if we get cut off in traffic, or we cut off other people, if we receive or give the wrong order at the coffee shop. So if we didn't have a stance of forgiveness, of being able to sort of let some of that stuff go, we would be constantly living in this rigid, angry state of being, which is actually what the science is starting to say about lack of forgiveness. That lack of forgiveness puts you in this rigid, angry state of being, which has both negative effects on you mentally and negative effects on your physical health. It's interesting because it's only in the last couple of decades that psychologists have really taken to researching forgiveness, and they're actually having some trouble defining it. I think it's odd that something as foundational as forgiveness, something that we all need in order to have harmony in the world, in order to get by in our daily lives, we're constantly exercising forgiveness, whether we realize it or not, has not been the subject of scientific inquiry until very recently. So even scientists, even psychologists, even clinicians are having trouble defining exactly what does this term mean. I mean, we all think we get the idea, like, okay, I forgive you. We know what it is, right? But consider this question. Is forgiveness an emotion, or is forgiveness a behavior? So some of the scientific literature is actually saying that forgiveness can be something that we do both internally and externally. That you can forgive internally, for example, by letting something go, like working through your anger, processing the grief, but not want to share it with that unsafe person, or not want that unsafe person back in your life because you don't want that behavior repeated. That doesn't mean that you're in a place of unforgiveness. It simply means that you've forgiven and you're drawing a healthy boundary. That's one of the things that I really want people to take away from this today, is that forgiveness does not mean no boundaries. It doesn't mean you open yourself up to repeated toxic, narcissistic, awful attacks. Not at all. It means you're letting yourself off the hook from having to carry around a heavy, energetic grudge that takes a lot of energy. That's what forgiveness is about. The other thing is you can forgive externally because it's what your mind and heart want to do, even if you still feel angry inside. Like you can write to somebody or call somebody and say, I forgive you. And actually inside you're still like, I'm a little tender about the thing. So there's an external nuances to forgiveness and internal nuances. And in the scientific literature, what the researchers are coming up with is that actually both count and both are at play, and sometimes also both don't count. So it really is about the sincerity that you bring to the act of forgiveness. If you're sincerely trying to forgive externally, even if your heart and emotions haven't caught up to it yet, it will start to reap positive benefits in your life. If you're forgiving externally because culture says so, because etiquette says so, because you think you're supposed to, but you're not ready to forgive and you don't want to forgive, then it doesn't count and it's not going to help you in any way. So then you just wait until you're ready and you keep the safe boundary up. Same thing with forgiving internally. If you forgive internally because it's something you genuinely really want to do, then it's going to reap really positive benefits and rewards in your life. If you forgive internally, you try to force a letting go when your heart isn't ready to let go, it's not going to have the positive effects because you're acting against yourself. It's interesting because the word sin, what the biblical word for all the terrible things humans do, in Sanskrit, it actually means to act against one's self. So sin is not an indication of this particular thing or this particular thing or this particular thing. That's some added on BS from the church. Sin just means to step out of line with your own integrity and to act against yourself. So when we endeavor to tiptoe into the realm of forgiveness about something where we've been hurt or wronged or angered or really deeply wounded, we have to stay in line with our integrity, which means we can't rush the process. But you also, if you can, you don't want to ignore the tug of your heart that's trying to ask you to forgive, because it's not asking you to forgive to let the other person off the hook, to condone the other person's behavior, to bestow upon them some kind of gift of approval. It's asking you to forgive, to let your own heart off the hook, to let your own self off the hook, to let your own self breathe easier. So in 1997, a psychological study was done, and the researchers defined forgiveness in terms of a person's intrinsic motivation, like this. 1, you have a decrease in motivation to retaliate against other people if you're in a state of forgiveness. You have a decreased motivation to maintain the estrangement from offenders. Now, to be clear here, this doesn't mean that you invite them back into your life. Maintaining estrangement is an active process of holding a grudge and keeping the relationship fractured. So you can drop the need to maintain estrangement and still keep up the healthy boundary. There's nuance here, but that's really important to understand, because I don't want anyone out there watching this thinking forgiveness means you have to let toxic people back into your life. It does not mean that. And the third attribute of being in a state of forgiveness is an increased motivation to have conciliatory emotions or goodwill towards the offenders. It means you've done the hard work of empathizing and realizing, like, I could do the same thing in a different set of circumstances, that we're all capable of the full range of human emotions. One test that measures a person's general disposition towards forgiveness is called the transgression narrative test of forgiveness. And it found that those who were not inclined toward forgiveness were also more prone generally to be angry, to have more anxiety, and to have more access readily to their negative emotions. So we can see how forgiveness is good for us, not them, us. It's also good for society as a whole, because people who are living in a stance of forgiveness are promoting harmony, whether they let people back in their lives or not. That same forgiveness scale, that assessment tool, it showed that people who were inclined toward forgiveness, according to this scale, are likely to be higher in compassion, more easily able to access their empathy and their emotion of trust. So all these emotions, compassion, empathy, and trust, we now know from emerging science, they have physical as well as mental health benefits on the human body. There was a second tool called the transgressions-related interpersonal relationship inventory. And this also suggested that people who are more forgiving have better relationships across the board, not just with the egregious offenders, but with everybody. The people who are more inclined towards forgiveness as a habit, as a rule, they have better, more coherent, stronger relationships across the board, because they're able to do, what is it, the Corinthians verse or something, where love overlooks wrongs, right? That's just a way of saying, like, the small slights, the little things that bother us every day, we can have an adaptability to them, a flexibility to them. We can let people off the hook for, like, not picking up their socks, you know, or parking in the wrong spot in the driveway, or whatever it is. So these small little things, if we can forgive those, it's practicing and strengthening our ability to be compassionate, empathetic, and trusting in the broader scope of our lives. There was a Hope College study. This is the last sort of sciencey thing I want to share with you guys. Then I'm going to tell you a story about my deadbeat dad. But this Hope College study experimented with 70 students who came to the study with a hurt or a wound from someone who had wronged them in their lives. And they were broken down into two groups. And one group was told and given the instructions to practice forgiveness exercises, to like, you know, engender goodwill and empathy towards the offender, to try to let go. And they were given psychological methods to do that. The other group was encouraged to practice holding a grudge, to relive the memory, to sit in the angry emotions and practice what it would be like, and dream about revenge fantasies and that kind of things. The findings of that study suggested that forgiveness is associated with better physical health in terms of blood pressure, nervous system activity, cardiovascular health, even like skin temperature, among a whole host of other things. So forgiveness is not only good for our ability to be compassionate, our ability to be relaxed, but it's also good for our ability to be healthy, to be strong, to be vital in the world. So here's how forgiveness played out in my own life with my deadbeat dad. In 1997, I was graduating high school. So that gives you some idea of how old I am at this point. That was in my born again Christian days. You know, I moved around a lot as a kid. So when I got to Connecticut, I sort of fell in with this Young Life crowd, which was a really beautiful growth experience for me. And I became a born again Christian. And during that time, I started to feel this tug to forgive my father. Even though I didn't know what it meant yet, I didn't know I could forgive him internally and not externally. So in my senior year of high school, I think right around graduation, I went to tell him the good news: I forgive you. At this point, just to give you a little backstory, we hadn't seen each other in 2 years, because throughout my time growing up, we were basically raised by my mom. She was a single mom. She went back to college during our time in school to like give us a better life, to try to provide for us. And during that time, I started to get wind through conversations they had, through, you know, you grow up and you kind of hear things. And I started to understand that my dad, he wouldn't pay child support. He wouldn't pay alimony. Like, he didn't want as much visitation as like maybe we would want. And like, as those things started to become clear to me, I was like, well, screw that. His last name is like kind of a boring, weird last name. And I was like, I don't want that last name anymore. I'm going to take my mom's last name, which is Hogan, which is the name I go by now. So in junior high, I changed my name from my dad's last name to my last name that I have now. And I started doing it hyphenated. And then about 2 years after that, I kind of just switched it over to Hogan. And I went through a process in Connecticut that you can go through to legally change your name just because you use it for a long period of time, non-fraudulently, and it's changed. So I changed my name to Brian Hogan, and that was fully executed by 8th grade. In my sophomore year of high school, my dad had taken me and my sister out to dinner. And when we got home from dinner, we're sitting in the driveway. My sister goes inside, and I decide to show my dad my report card, which I've showed him report cards for the past 3 years. And this one, he sees the name Brian Hogan on it, and he flips out. So the first clue here about his deadbeatness is that I'd been showing him report cards for 3 years, and he did not notice the name change for 3 years. And then this time, so he barely looks at them. He barely cared, but this time he noticed, and he flipped out, and he was like, what's this about? And I was like, well, I changed my name. Like, mom's really there for us. And, no offense, but you're kind of not. And he was like, you disown the name, you disown your father. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not changing my name back. So this is a choice you're making to push me out. And from that time on, we didn't see each other for 2 solid years. Junior year, senior year, I didn't see my dad at all. So in 1997 now, I decide I'm going to go forgive him. So I get to the house. I had another friend of mine named Brian. He was a good friend of mine, a fellow born-again Christian. So there's 2 Brians now. There's me and my buddy Brian, and he drove me there because I was like, when this process is over, I might need some moral support, so come with me. So another pro tip for those of you who are going to try to execute forgiveness, especially if you're going to try to do it externally, phone a friend, bring a support system. You don't have to do it alone. That's just crazy talk. So I brought my friend Brian with me, and we decided he was going to wait in the car and I was going to go inside. So I go inside. I'm sitting down across from my dad and my stepmom. I like to say my wicked stepmother. So no offense if you're watching, but you know it's true. So I'm sure you're not wicked in your soul, stepmom, but you were not a great stepmom. So whatever. Anyway, I'm sitting across from my dad and my stepmom at the kitchen table. And I start we're doing small talk for a minute there. And then finally he comes around to like why I'm there. And I was like, well, I just wanted to let you know that I forgive you, for all the things. And I started listing all the things like, I forgive you for the child support. I forgive you for kind of being absent. I forgive you for like, a whole list of stuff. And, he kind of pauses. He looks at me and he goes, oh, well, I don't think I have anything to be forgiven for. And that kind of just like knocked me back a little bit in the chair. So we sat in silence for a minute, wicked stepmom cackling. That's my memory of it. I'm sure she wasn't really cackling, but you're young, whatever. So in my mind, she's cackling and we're just going to go with that. So my dad's there, we're silent, she's cackling. And then I don't know what came over me. I really don't. So I look up at him and I just said, and I don't know why I said this. And I said, do you love me? And we sat in silence again for what felt like an era in history to me, like a long silence. And he takes a deep breath in and he goes, well, I care for you, son. So I got up and I walked out the door and I didn't see him for 20 years. That was a huge turning point for me though, because even though I had a new wound from my dad who wasn't even able to tell me he loved me at the time, I also felt freer. I was freshly wounded, yeah, but I was able to process that with my friend Brian because I was cocooned in the wisdom and the understanding that I had followed the tug of my heart and forgiven. Now, I realize now I didn't actually have to go and forgive externally. I could have forgiven him internally as just a stance in my heart. So if you're feeling the tug to forgive and it doesn't feel like it's safe to forgive the person externally, you can enact this forgiveness in your heart. You can perform a ritual. You can perform a ceremony. You can do it just in your own quiet solitude. So I felt freer and it was amazing. And for the next 20 years, I didn't see my dad at all, but I lived freer. I felt I had an amount of closure that I needed. I felt bolstered by the bravery that 18-year-old kid had shown, and being able to like forgive somebody and being able to say it and being able to share it and being able to stand out in front of that forgiveness. So 20 years later, I moved back to Connecticut. This is 2017 now. And I decided to look him up. This time it was not to forgive. That was done. It was really done. I had felt forgiveness. I felt a stance of forgiveness toward him. I wasn't even sure why I looked him up, to be honest. Like, perhaps I wanted some more closure for myself this time. So I called and my wicked stepmom answered the phone, and she was very much less wicked this time. So if you're watching, you've grown. It's great. Fine. But she answered the phone and she warned me that my dad had early onset dementia, but that I could come visit and that he was lucid most of the time and that he would love to see me. So that felt odd. Not the dementia part, but he'd love to see you part. I was like, really? I don't even, okay, sure. Well, we'll see what happens. But I arrive to see them and, we make a little small talk and he's kind of lucid. And so I decide I'm going to show them a recent short film of mine. And I show them a short film. It's a horror movie film about puppets, which you can actually see on my website at lifestoryhacking.com if you're so inclined. It's called Play Along. So I show them that movie, and after I show them the movie, my dad looks at me and he see like there was a nice looking woman in there, one of the stars of the movie, and he's like, oh, so on your film sets, do you ever like, hook up with the ladies? Or he put it something like that, like trying to sound like, younger or whatever. And I was like, oh crap, he doesn't even realize. So I was like, I have to come out to my dad. Like, I'm 39 years old and I have to come out of the closet again. Like, I thought I'd left all that behind in my 20s. Like, there's still one more person for me to come out to. Oh my God, is this real? So, okay, I say, oh, I'm gay. And he looks at me with this like Mr. Rogers thing. I swear he does one of these. And he's like, that's an okay thing to be. So I was like, okay, that's good. You can't ask for a better reaction than that from like an 88-year-old with dementia who's trying to, hopefully trying to reconcile with his youngest son. So that was fine. That went by. And my stepmom too, she was like, okay, yeah, good. And like their support was genuine, but it was also like from the other generation. Like, yeah, we don't judge you, but we don't understand it either. And so we spent a little bit more time there. I showed them the movie. I showed them another movie. And then about 10 minutes later, my dad makes another comment about, my sex life or, women or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, he doesn't remember that I just came out of the closet to him. I literally just came out of the closet for the first time in 15 years to my dad, and he does not remember that it happened. Okay. So yeah, gear up again. Here we go. This time I do it again. Okay. Oh, I'm gay, just trying to, because you don't say like, I already told you that, like with dementia sufferers, you just kind of like go with the flow. So I'm gay. And he's like, oh, okay. That's an okay thing to be. Again, it's like literally I'm caught in this like hell loop of coming out and acceptance. And so basically for the next hour, I had to come out to my father every 10 minutes for the entire hour I was there. It was ridiculous. I took that as the universe giving me a chance to bask in repeated acceptance from a man who had repeatedly rejected me in my youth. It was comical, but it was healing, and it was ridiculous all at the same time. The point is, he rejected my forgiveness, but I still felt freer. Then 20 years later, I followed the pull of my heart again, and I went to see him, and I was given the gift of repeated and ridiculous acceptance that gave me even more freedom. My dad had 10 children and was estranged from all 10. It was probably the only perfect score he ever got. That's a joke I make in my memoir. And he said it meant a great deal to him that I came to visit him, and it actually showed what a great man I was and what a great man I turned out to be. I didn't need his validation, but it was nice to hear, and it warmed my heart to play a role in his life that not only gave me closure, but seemed to give him some closure as well. So by showing him compassion, I realized I was really showing myself compassion, and I see that so clearly now. So you can forgive internally, or you can forgive externally. Either way, forgiveness sets you free. It does not mean you're forgetting the events or rewriting in history. It means you're prioritizing your own emotional freedom over revenge for somebody else or over somebody else's grudge or misery. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. And for the last few minutes, I'm going to take some questions. So if you have a question and you're watching this, go ahead and throw that in the chat. But I have a few questions from people that submitted questions ahead of time. And so Dora asks, if I find myself caught up in my past, for example, repeating a pattern from the past, what can I practically do in order to change my present future when I feel glued to this pattern? So something that works for me is to interrupt the pattern. And in order to interrupt the pattern, you have to notice and recognize the pattern, which it sounds, Dora, like you already do recognize and notice that you have these patterns. So the next step would be to interrupt it. Like I was just telling a client on the phone yesterday that I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so I have this pattern of automatically saying yes to things, even if it's a no for my heart, or even if I don't have time. And so now what I started to do was when I would feel myself saying yes, or even after I said yes, I would say, oh, wait, hold on. I just said yes, but that's an old pattern. I need to think for a minute if I actually have time for this. Give me a second, or let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you. And so just even saying that's an old pattern, give me a moment, is a huge way to disrupt the pattern and start breaking down the habitual neural pathway in your brain. So that's one thing you can do, is just interrupt, recognize, notice, and then disrupt. Mark asks, what quick way to fit a practice of forgiveness into daily life? And how will I know that a practice of forgiveness is helping with the release of resentment? In other words, what does successful forgiveness look and feel like? Okay, that's a great question. So it's a stance toward the small stuff of being adaptable, willing to laugh at it, to let it go, to not feel internally wronged by life. Now, I'm not talking about the big things yet. So I use something called the benefit of the doubt technique to kind of like remind myself that I want to be in a perpetual stance of forgiveness about all the stuff that goes wrong on a daily basis in my life. So the benefit of the doubt technique looks like this. When somebody cuts me off in traffic, I use this one because I don't have road rage, but I definitely have road cranky. And so I use this traffic example because it's true to my life and very real for me. So, when somebody cuts me off in traffic, instead of assuming the worst about them, I literally now say to myself, okay, what if they're racing their pregnant wife to the hospital? If I knew that, and I knew that for sure, would I be so likely to be angry right now that they cut me off, or would I have been willing to even let them in? And that kind of thing, it actually helps shift me back into the stance of understanding, the place of relaxation. And what it looks like and feels like is ease. You feel on a daily basis, on a regular basis, more likely to inject humor and less tension into all of your interactions because you're constantly in a stance of trying to give the benefit of the doubt. That can start very much so with the small stuff, with forgiving a rainy day for being there, forgiving the clumsy barista, forgiving the late delivery guy. And eventually it can lead to forgiving your deadbeat dad, or to letting go of the angry parts of you that are actually keeping the person that wronged you alive in your life, even though you don't want to have contact with them. So Serena asks, how do you know when you have a habit you need to drop versus you are actually experiencing something negative? Okay, interesting question. So I'm not sure if I have your meaning right, but I think what you're asking is the difference between a bad habit and something actually negative. And so like a bad habit, I don't like the word bad, but like, let's say an unhealthy habit or a habit that no longer serves you. Those are marked by a sense of feeling out of control. So they fill you with a sense of not being in control of yourself and a sense of self-betrayal. A negative experience that you need to remove yourself from, on the other hand, will feel like freedom to you when you move away. So an unhealthy habit will feel like jail, but moving away from something actually negative will feel like freedom. I'm not sure if that answers your question. If you want to talk more about that, put a comment in the chat, and I look at these posts throughout the week, so I can add more. We can discuss. I love to talk about this kind of thing. Laura asks, I've heard the best indicator of the future is to look at the past as history repeats itself. Is that not true? Yeah, I don't believe it's true. No, to be honest, if we look this way at the past to define the future, then we are looking with a predefined future. We're looking at a future that is predefined by the past because the past has already happened. So for me, the best indicator of the future is the present moment, because this now moment has all the raw material that we need to carve out a brand new future, like something never seen before in the past, something never seen before on the planet. In my opinion, we're living through an unprecedented time of a transformation of human consciousness now on this planet, away from rigidity, away from patriarchy, away from systems, centralized power that no longer works, towards individuals, like towards self-reliance, toward community unity that's voluntary. So it's not about going from centralized power to individualism. It's going from centralized power to distributed power among groups who decide voluntarily to work in harmony. This transition of human consciousness, I don't believe there's a reference point for it in the past. Sorry, there's a bug here. So I don't think looking at the past is the best indicator of defining the future, especially now, especially in this bottleneck time that we're living in on the planet, where we're going through something that I believe to be very unprecedented. So what we do now determines the future way more powerfully than anything we've done in the past. That goes for carbon emissions. It goes for everything. Like there is no such thing as too late. There's only now, and the power in the now moment. Suzette asks, is happiness the emotion to strive for? How can we strive for happiness without engaging in toxic positivity? Well, I agree. You don't really want to strive for happiness. And I know that sounds funny, especially because of the authentic happiness in episode 2. But authentic happiness is different than the emotion of happiness. It's like a state of being. And so no, happiness is not the emotion that we want to strive for. Emotions are sacred. All emotions are sacred. Even the emotion of resentment is sacred. The state of being to strive for is one of openness, relaxed flexibility, so that any emotions, happiness or otherwise, can come through and enrich our experience as we feel them, as we navigate them, as we grow stronger because of our experience with them. So it's not about avoiding negative emotions. It's about opening to the full range of human experience. When we are open to the full range of human experience, even the negative, what ends up happening is that we feel more happiness more often, because harmony and peace is our natural human state of being when we heal wounds and uncover or dismantle the cultural lies that are on top of that natural state of being. So there's nothing to strive for. There's only a natural state of being of harmony, peace, and relaxed flexibility that we can open back up to, that we can uncover. Okay, so that is our time for today. I hope that helped. And I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. And if this episode benefited you in some way and you feel like it might benefit someone else, then feel free to share this video or tag them in this post. And if you want to learn more about me and what I do and the coaching, you can do that at thebrianhogan.com for more information or to apply for coaching. And as always, this has been a true pleasure of mine. I will see you guys next week, same bat time, same bat channel, Wednesday morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And until then, be hot, be messy, and be blessed. Thank you so much.